Hey guys, it's Raven. We have another deck video for you today. Today we're going to be talking about the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division. This is actually the only German mechanized division that will be in the game on account of being the only mechanized division in Normandy at the time. It's definitely an infantry division, but it's kind of interesting because it doesn't have maybe the normal things you would expect in a mechanized division, like half-track transports where it's infantry or tanks, aside from Stug assault guns. And it definitely relies on the support a little bit more. It's actually not a deck that I'm really that crazy about, so rather than have a video where I kind of beg on the division for 20 minutes, I've brought in my friend Lumpy, who does like the deck a lot, and his depth of knowledge and skill is almost as incomparable as my own. So he's here to help me go through his deck, and we'll talk about it and compare them. You wanna say hi, Lump?
Hello, everyone.
So, what do you think about the 17th, Lumpy? Am I wrong in what I said just a minute ago?
Not exactly. The 17th is kind of awkward to play when you initially make a deck for it. It plays a little bit more similar to an allied division than I think the current German ones do. It lacks a lot of the key, like, offensive pieces, like mainly tanks and early light vehicles. But it makes up for it by having some really good supporting units that we'll go over later that kind of supplement the slightly overcost infantry.
So when you said that the deck plays like an allied division, what do you mean by that?
So the Germans typically have more expensive infantry, heavier tanks. They usually kind of dominate the ground war, whereas the 17th kind of has to rely on positioning, complementary units, and some other stuff that are kind of common to allied decks, whereas, like, for example, the 12th is mostly just relying on your superior tanks to kind of dominate the battlefield.
Alright. Is there anything else you want to add to it, or are you ready to jump into the deck itself?
I think we can go ahead and jump in.
Alright, let's take a look. Alright, so this is Lumpy's deck, and I guess we'll just go down the line and start with Recon. Well, first, kind of tell me a little bit about your philosophy with how you built the deck, and how do you start Phase A, or just what are you looking for when you're building your deck?
Okay, so this deck, as you'll notice as you play it, has a very weak Phase A. It kind of relies, kind of similar to the 12th, on a handful of units to kind of drag it through Phase A to be able to get to Phase B. One of those is a Stug, which we'll go over later, and the other one is the 221, which is in the Recon tab. So this unit has 8 AP. It's a little armored car that comes with a recon squad, which is really nice. You kind of get a 2-for-1 bonus. But this unit is really good at kind of protecting your infantry from half-tracks and, to a lesser extent, Stuarts. But it's definitely a nice little unit in the recon tab to kind of help you get through Phase A and support your AT guns.
Yes, it's got really high rate of fire. It's 15 rate of fire, which means it fires every 4 seconds. It's got pretty good AP, and downside is its accuracy is kind of low, which it's kind of the problem, but this is really the only unit I feel like the deck has that can effectively counter half-tracks in the early game. What you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so yeah, like I think I take 2 cards of them as well, but I see you have 2 cards of 3 in Phase A. That's a total of 6. Probably never need more than that, I'd guess. But you also take Spay Troop in Phase A.
Yeah, so the Spay Troop are just kind of like a cheap recon squad that you can sprinkle around on your flanks. Just basic squad. They do have minimal combat capability, so they can kind of push off other recon squads. But generally, you want to sit them in heavy cover somewhere and just have their set to return fire, or even just cut their weapons off so they don't reveal themselves.
Yeah, I really like the return fire aspect. They have a machine gun, which is 400 meter range, and that That outranges most recon squads, so in terms of another recon squad maybe pushing up, these guys are actually really good at hunting other recon squads because of their armaments, and that if they fight anything, that's usually what they should be fighting.
And I was gonna say, there's an alternative that you could actually do if you wanted to. Is you could take the BMW Recon motorcycle. You're trading stealth for speed, but it does have a machine gun. So if anybody has ever played like Company of Heroes or anything with like the Kubel wagon kind of idea, where you drive around and suppress enemy infantry squads, and you're just like kind of annoying to help you get through Phase A, that'd be something that would be interesting to try, but I haven't done it myself, so.
Yeah, I don't like it because it's supposed to be a recon unit, so it feels like its utility is a little limited if it can't hide like that. But this deck definitely does lack fire support options in the early game, so definitely maybe worth trying. So the only other card we have right now is the 231, the SPW 231. This is a armored car with a 20 mil half track and a machine gun. See, you take it. It is in Phase B. Unfortunately, it'd be really nice if you could get it in Phase A, I think. But it's a really nice unit, isn't it?
Yeah, I really like it. It's just a solid support unit for your infantry. Again, it kind of helps fend off half tracks. Not so much, Stewarts or any of that kind of thing, because it just doesn't have the AP and it's a little squishy. But it's just really good fire support.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it for recon. So how about infantry? Well, tell me about your infantry section.
Well, the first thing you're going to notice with the 17th Infantry is that none of the mainline 10-man infantry squads get AT. So as we were talking about earlier with the 221 and the armored cars, you really have to support your infantry and make sure they don't get overrun by vehicles. So one of the main units that kind of helps do that in the early game is the SS Strasstruppen. The Strasstruppen are a 6-man like shock infantry squad. They have three PPSHs, 2 MP40s, and a Panzerfaust, and they also get smoke grenades. They're very good in the early game to kind of deny line of sight, pushing off bigger allied infantry squads from your own infantry, and kind of shielding your Panzer Grenadiers since they can't use their machine gun in close range.
I never see people use the smoke grenades on these, and I know I do, and I've seen you do it even more, but it's really only 25 points. It really is a versatile little unit. I really like it.
And another thing kind of along that line is your Panzer Grenadier Führer. Again, this is a 15-point command infantry squad. It's not very combat capable. It can, obviously, if it needs to, but the main benefit is giving your infantry some vet to compete against allied infantry, and the smoke grenade. A lot of people don't realize that these units have smoke grenades. You use them just like a mortar. If you hit the B button, or if you've remapped it, whatever button you remapped it to, and it can throw 100 meters, it's almost instantaneous. It's a really useful ability to have in the early game.
Yeah, you can actually put down a little wall of smoke with them pretty effectively, and with the Strasstruppen in particular, like in city fighting, I really like to use the smoke to enable movement, like say running across the street to another building. And keeping in mind, these guys, their guns are only 100 meters in range, so that's ultra close distance. Like if you're in a forest, you'll hit with them. If you're in the city block next to someone, you'll hit them, but anything outside of that range, you're not going to be shooting them. So that smoke is really important for these guys to maneuver, because as soon as they get up into their preferred range of 100 meters, they're really going to tear stuff up. Okay, what about, I see you take the MG42 team and 2 cards of Panzer Grenadiers in Phase A, yeah?
Yeah, so the Panzer Grenadier, kind of self-explanatory. If anybody has played the 12th SS, Panzer Grenadiers, kind of what they're about, long range. They kind of complement the Strasstruppen, where they help pin down squads at longer range and move in to support them. The MG42, I know heavy machine guns are kind of a hot topic right now. Really effective unit. 5 accuracy, 9 HE, 600 meter range, really high rate of fire. Again, it's another long range suppressing unit that helps you utilize your Strauss Troop in the early game.
I think it's important too because this deck lacks fire support. If it wasn't for the lack of vehicles with machine guns in Phase A and that sort of stuff, I might actually not take these guys, but I really feel like you need them in this deck. And they do support the Panzergrenadiers, which have they have 2 machine guns, which are 400 meter range, and these guys and the MG team are really kind of the long-range standoff infantry that maybe dominate a hedgerow or keep people out of towns. They're not really so much for town fighting, and they're definitely not for brawling in a forest. That's definitely what the Strauss Trooping is, but it seems like the key to this deck in Phase A is maybe utilizing your support weapons, which we'll talk about in a minute, and also having the Strauss Trooping complement your other infantry and vice versa. I really think that Phase A Strauss Trooping and the Phase A machine gun team is pretty important in this deck.
Yeah, and another thing that's really important, which we'll also touch on in the support tab, is making sure that your units are almost always under the umbrella of a commander. Since the German infantry have a tendency to be a little bit more expensive, they're not quite as cost efficient. You really need to make sure that you get all the benefits of vet to be able to keep up with the number of allied infantry that you're going to be fighting against, because if you don't, you're going to get shredded in infantry combat. So it's really important to use your commanders in this deck.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. German infantry are more expensive and they are less numerous. That's one of my problems with this deck, actually. I really feel Panzergrenadiers should have, like, say, 6 per card in A. I just don't like how tight the infantry tab feels. I'd like it to have another slot or more availability or whatever. But anyways, Phase B, we got 2 cards of Pioneers, a card of Panzergrenadiers. Why 2 Pioneers over, say, 3 Panzergrenadiers or 2 Panzergrenadiers and 1 Pioneer?
Okay, so the Phase B infantry, as you can see with this deck, if you look at the top left, you can see the income. In Phase B, you get 125 points of income.
It's a big
which
spike.
Is, I think, one of the highest values in the game right now, if I'm not mistaken.
For Phase B.
Right. So if in Phase B, you really want to be focusing on assaulting a position, because you just spent all the Phase A getting just slammed by the allies. So you really want to try and flip it around with your artillery, which we'll talk about again later. But the Pioneers over the Panzergrenadiers. So the Pioneers are more of an assault infantry. They're kind of like a beefier version of the Strauss Troop. You can see here that they have a bundled frag grenade that has 22 HE, has 100 meter range, so it's almost just like the Strauss Troop, same concept. When they get into close range fights, that grenade will almost always one-shot an enemy infantry squad if it's at least like 10 man or less. It's just a really great value unit, whereas the Panzergrenadiers kind of take over the role of the machine gun, where they're at long range just kind of suppressing, because obviously this deck doesn't really have enough space to fit in another card of machine gun, unfortunately. So Panzergrenadiers kind of take that role in Phase B.
Yeah, it's really, and this is true in a lot of German decks. I feel there's the yin and the yang between the longer range standoff infantry and the Pioneers, and that's definitely a mistake I see a lot of German players make, is either trying to use Pioneers in kind of longer range fighting or trying to use Panzergrenadiers in cities. Like these 2 units have a very tightly defined role of where they're good and where they'll beat allied infantry. For example, a Panzergrenadier will lose to a Scottish rifle squad, which is only 20 points in close combat, but they'll totally dominate them at longer range, and vice versa for the Pioneers, they'll dominate them at shorter range. So there's a lot more finesse with German infantry, don't you think, where you gotta choose the right squad for the job as opposed to the allies, which are maybe a little more generalized.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. The other thing to consider in this deck is maybe switching out one of the Pioneers and kind of super specializing in close range with the Stern Pioneer. They're a 6-man infantry squad. They're not very amazing. They get 3 rifles, 2 SMGs, which are obviously good close range, but they're interesting because they're one of the only 6-man flamethrower teams in the game. The the flamethrower in close range is deadly. It pushes units out of buildings. It's almost an instantaneous pin, so the suppression is really high, and it's just a really good shock unit, maybe in Phase B. So it would be an interesting thing to try instead of 2 cards Pioneer.
See, I would take them if you got another infantry card, but it's just too hard to fit it in. Like, you can't take them and the Strauss Trooper, and I feel like it's one or the other, and Strauss Trooper are just so good you can't make it fit. But anyways, it's probably all for infantry, so I guess we'll move on to tanks. Alright, so now we have tanks. There's not much choice here. There's pretty much Stugs and not much else. Well, you have the veteran Stug 3 in Phase A, which it's okay, right? It's got 14 AP. This is actually kind of like I would describe it almost like a mini Firefly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so it kind of fills the same role as a Firefly, where it's kind of like a stopgap unit in Phase A, but it doesn't really have the armor of the Firefly. As like a Stewart, a third armored division Stewart can actually pin this relatively easy at almost max range, so you really have to be careful with it.
Yeah, but it's a really strong starting unit. It's pretty much a must-have, I would say, in this deck, unless you happen to go to a specific area that just would not benefit this tank. But it's a really strong Phase A unit that kind of falls off. It's also the only choice in Phase A, but once we get to Phase B, there's a lot of other stuff. You don't take the Befehl Panzer IV, I see.
No, so the game mechanics kind of don't really differentiate between turreted and non-turreted vehicles currently. So I just figured I would take just the overall better unit in the Stug 4 rather than take the Befehl Panzer 4, but that could change in the future.
Well, so let's see, what's the difference? They have the same gun. Befehl Panzer has more machine guns, obviously, but otherwise pretty much the same, except the Stug does have a lot more armor. The Stug's a nice kind of defensive tank, I guess, right? It's not... Because of the lack of turret, it has to orient its entire body to face whatever it's facing. So if you're on the offensive or pushing through a hedgerow, I find it's not really useful for attacking. Would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The Stug 4 is definitely a defensive-oriented tank, but my philosophy kind of with this deck is that the Stugs, you kind of use them almost as a mobile AT gun, which I think is basically how they were used in real life. They're just really good to kind of stick in, in hedgerows or using line of sight blockers to kind of give them an advantageous position, and you kind of use them in that role rather than assaulting with your tanks.
All right, I see. Let's see. We don't take any Stug 3s because for 10 less points, they lose 2 armor, so that's not really a good trade. But I see you do take, let's see, 1 card of non-vet, 1 card of up-vet in B, and then another card of up-vet in C, for a total of, what is that, 9 Stug 4s?
Yeah, so my philosophy kind of when building these decks is to always make sure that I have enough. I like to kind of overstock, I guess, my deck of units, and then as I play it and get a little bit more experience, I kind of like gradually bring myself down to a tighter number. So as I keep playing this deck, I might end up actually taking 2 cards of up-vet Stugs in B, but as of right now, I just take the numbers just so I don't run out.
Okay. What about the 2-star vet Stug? Any thoughts on that?
I haven't personally tried it yet, but knowing how the Stug performs, it probably would be a good choice. It's just a matter of backloading your deck or front-loading it in terms of phasing, and I feel like this deck really needs to take advantage of the income in Phase B and its other units to try and get an advantage so it can use its anti-tank assets in Phase C, which we'll go over later.
Yeah. Alright. Support. Alright, so this is a pretty meaty section. I'd say this deck maybe has a little more reliance on support section than other decks, and that's represented in it has 6 slots, and you take advantage of 5 of them. So stands out to me, first of all, is the 2 cards of 3, but a total of 6 IG-18s, which is Infantry Geschütz. It's a infantry support gun. I know you really like this unit, so let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so right off the bat, what kind of stuck out to me with this unit is that it has vet. A lot of the support assets and artillery in this deck have veterancy, so they're a little bit more accurate. They're a little bit less prone to counter battery from like mortar fire or whatever. But specifically the IG-18 is a really nice fire support unit. It kind of takes over the role of vehicles. It has 9 HE. It fires 6 rounds a minute. 800-meter range, so it outranges heavy machine guns, which I kind of think are starting to become the meta, especially with the 2nd Infantry Division that get the Ranger heavy machine guns. It's really good support. You can move through hedgerows, which is a major advantage over a vehicle. Obviously, vehicles can't move through heavy cover, so I mean the IG-18 is like perfect for supporting an infantry push.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is an integral unit for the deck. Like you said, the veterancy is really important. It also affects rate of fire. And I don't know, like when I play the 12th, for example, you're really relying on half tracks, 20 mil positional play, and that kind of stuff with your vehicles. And so with this deck, it's a little more the IG-18s, and that's interesting. In some ways, it's more versatile because, like you said, you can go through hedgerows, but I don't know, like with all the mortars and stuff in the game right now, and I think artillery is a little too powerful, and towed weapons like this definitely suffer, but I like what they were trying to do with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting little unit, and like I said, the veterancy definitely affects rate of fire and improves just the overall combat ability, but it also helps kind of prevent it from being stunned by mortars. You really have to kind of shoot and scoot with it. You can't really stay in a spot very long.
That's a good point too. A lot of people with towed weapons, they'll just leave them somewhere. You know, oh, I got a good sight line over the road, and you just can't get away with that from against a good player. Like they'll always artillery it. So these, despite the fact that they're really an immobile unit, you have to make them as mobile as possible. Let's see, we have a Opel Blitz munition truck. It's pretty self-explanatory. I see you take them in B. I presume that's because you have a lot of artillery to power in the later phases.
Yeah, that'd be correct. I've never actually really run out. It's just in case. It's another one of that situation just to make sure I have enough.
Okay, and then I see you take 232 in B and 232 in C. These are kind of armored cars, but they have the commander trait, and also they're actually 2-star veterancy, which is helpful because it makes their command aura bigger. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, the commanders in this deck, as I said earlier in the infantry tab, are really important because a lot of your units are generally cost inefficient, or they already have higher vet, like your IG-18s, your Strasstruppen. A lot of these units have veterancy, so if you have a lot of commanders, which is kind of, so far it's been rare for German decks, this is probably the first deck in the game on the German side that can get plentiful, cheap commanders. It just improves your army tenfold. And again, it's an armored car, so it helps push off those half tracks that are trying to annoy your infantry that don't get anti-tank. It's just a solid 45-point support vehicle.
Yeah. Let's see. There's the Schwere IG-33, the heavy infantry Geschütz gun, and the Grilla. With the IG-33, I kind of feel like it's the same thing as the IG-18, but it's just it has all those weaknesses where it's slow. It's really slow. It's only 8 kilometers an hour. It's vulnerable to artillery, so it's just not worth 80 points in one basket. I'd rather have, like you do, IG-18s. And then with the Grilla, I find maybe it's a little too ponderous and not enough shells to really... It only has 15 shells. It runs out of them. What do you think about those two units, yeah?
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I first started playing the 17th, I kind of gravitated to the IG-33 just because, you know, it's a really big HE gun. But like you said, the weaknesses are it's a lot slower. than the IG-18, which means that counter battery fire coming in most of the time ends up catching it, whereas the IG-18 can get away. And the grill, which is it's an infantry support vehicle, but I find a lot of the times with this deck that being able to move through hedgerows is a lot more important than having a really big expensive vehicle, because if you get into a woodland fight with the grill as your support, there's going to be a lot of times where your infantry are kind of left out to dry because your grill can't move through the hedgerow to help them. So if I was going to take either of these, I would take the IG-33.
Plus with the grill, it's 110 points, but it's only 4 armor. It's really slow and open top. Like it's really easy easy to lose it, and it's just not effective, I don't think. So, but that's like we said, support's really important for this deck. It kind of ties the deck in and maybe helps make up for weaknesses in the other sections, and kind of part of that is also the anti-tank section. So at the 17th, the anti-tank is pretty important. They have really strong anti-tank units, and they also have 7 available cards, which you avail yourselves of each single one. I see you take the Pak 38, 50mm in Phase A. I agree with that. It's kind of like you... I actually don't really like this gun, but you almost have to have it just to help deal with armored vehicles in that early phase where you're really weak. I see you don't take a card at Panzerschrecks, though, and I assume that's because you have Strauss Trooping in Phase A?
Yeah, that would be correct.
Yeah. So go on.
Yeah, the Pak 38, it's just there to kind of fend off Stuarts, and again half tracks, which you're going to find in Phase A are going to be your biggest threat to your infantry. The Panzerschrecks, you can take a card of them in Phase A, but I just rely on the Strauss Trooping in my anti-tank gun placement. Which, I mean, this is kind of weak to mortars. If somebody goes really hard into mortars and you can't either neutralize them or kind of play around them, then you're probably going to be in for a bad time.
Yeah, you can say that about... I mean, we were talking about towed units earlier, and that... let's see, 5 of your unit cards in this section are towed. You got your Pak 40 in Phase B, and then the Pak 43s later. This is kind of like a natural progression. You got the Pak 38, and then the Pak 40, which is 15 AP. This deck will definitely kill Shermans, but it'll struggle against... It won't, like, for sure pen them, and it'll struggle against, like, a Jumbo or something really heavy, and that's... I see you got the Pak 43, 88mm in B and C, and these are really the big guns. I mean, look how big this thing is. It has 22 AP, and it'll even crack a Jumbo from the front.
Yeah, they're definitely kind of the centerpiece of the deck. So my idea is in Phase B, I get the Panzerschreck teams to give my infantry anti-tank, since I might have run out of Strauss Trooping by then. The Martyr 3M is kind of an interesting unit, because you might say, well, you have the Stug, so why do you need the Martyr 3? So what the Martyr 3M basically is a tracked Pak 40, but it has 1200 meter range. The Pak 40 has 15 AP at 1000 meters, but due to the way AP scaling works, is the Martyr 3 has the same amount of AP at the same range.
Gains 1 AP every 100 meters, so 13 AP at 1200 meters becomes 15 at 1000 meters, just like the Pak 40.
Right. So the Pak gun, like you said, is towed. It's a little bit more defensive. The Martyr 3 just kind of gives my deck an ability to fight off any 76 Shermans, anything like that. It also lets me outrange infantry deck tanks, any of the M4 Sherman variants that have the 75mm gun. It's just a nice, solid unit.
Now, if I recall, you used to have the Martyr 3 in Phase C, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And that kind of goes back to, I like to tweak my deck. I like to take more than usually what I need and then kind of work my way down, so I kind of get a feel for how many units I need in the deck. And it also gives me a little bit more diversity earlier into the game, because I'm not waiting until 20 minutes into the game to call it a Martyr. I have it immediately 10 minutes into the game at Phase B.
Yeah, they're definitely good for supporting your Stugs, and the Stugs are kind of the front line, and the Martyr 3 is really there for like picking off 76 Shermans and whatnot. I like how you have 5 Pack 43s too, because that, I mean, it'd be really hard to use 5 in the course of one game unless it's just like a really tough game, but I could see maybe you supplying one to an ally or something. That'd be really helpful, because at least of the other decks right now, the 12th SS and the Luftland have a lot of trouble killing, like, say, a Jumbo.
Right, and that's kind of the idea behind taking 5 Pack 43s. You can take the 2-star Vet Pack 43, but again, it's kind of like a towed unit. I don't really like taking low availability towed units. I do it with the Phase B Pack 43 just because it gives you some kind of ability to fight Jumbos in Phase B. But I really like the leeway that having 4 of them in Phase C gives me. So it gives me assurance against artillery and planes, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see, anti-air. Alright, so let's see, we got 2 Flak Veerlings, 1 in A, 1 in B. Card of Flak 36, 37mm gun in Phase B, and a card of the tracked 37mm. What do you think about the AA section in this deck, or what do you think about AA in general?
So AA in general right now is kind of in an okay place. I think the idea, especially with this deck that I have right now, is that AA is kind of like a base for your fighters to retreat to when you're fighting the air war, which we'll kind of go into a little bit later in the air tab. The 17th gets some interesting AA pieces. You'll notice a lot of the late game ones actually have veterancy, so they do actually perform pretty well. And when you add to the commanders that you have in the support tab, they actually become pretty effective on their own. So you don't really need as many AA pieces as you would in a normal deck.
Yeah, I think something I've seen a lot is people just aren't buying AA because, you know, their 2 Flak Veerlings won't kill a plane, so they'll think, oh, well, this is garbage. But really, and to build on what you said, the purpose of AA feels like it's to push off stuff and protect your planes, because if you're setting up a plane and then the enemy sends a bunch of Spitfires after you, then it helps be able to retreat to your AA and have them force the planes away. And like you said, veterancy really helps. Like, we did a test where 2 Flak Veerlings with a commander, I believe, killed a Spitfire as an evac past them, right?
Yeah, it did. The veterancy definitely helps these units. And that's kind of the idea in Phase A, is to protect your infantry and your supporting units from getting strafed. Like, on their own, like you said, 2 Flak Veerlings aren't going to do anything. But if you have a cheap commander next to them and a unit dives down to strafe your stuff, it has a pretty good chance of being killed rather than just getting away.
As long as it's a light plane, but that, like a P-38 in Phase A, I think that is a light plane in terms of survivability. So, I mean, that's really what the Flak Veerling's for, is just if someone's harassing you or being a D-bag with his planes, it's just, you know, make him F off, like, go away, evac, stop strafing my mortars. And I mean, as you go on, you have 5 in your deck, a total 2 in A and 3 in B, so that kind of lets you spread them out. And I see the 37mm in B. 37mm is kind of like, in my opinion, one of the more effective German AA pieces, because it has the range where 2 or 3 of them can actually stop bombing drops, and especially with a commander. So in terms of bang for your buck, I really feel like the 37mm is the way to go. And I don't know if I would agree with 2 cards of Flak Veerlings per se, but 37mm is pretty good. I see you also have the C variant of it too.
Yeah, so like the idea of this air defense net is that the Flak Veerlings just kind of add numbers. They kind of beef out my anti-air net, so I'm not just having a bunch of 37mm kind of sitting around. It kind of protects them from being just kind of like Zerg rushed with a bunch of planes. And then the 37mm provide range, so you kind of get that extended umbrella of protection.
That's true. The flak 36s, 37 millimeters, run out of ammunition pretty fast. Like, it can fire for about a minute and a half, I think, before they run out of ammunition, and over the course of a game, I mean, that's like nothing. So it is kind of a pain in the ass to resupply them, and that's definitely one area the flak Virulings kind of come in, is that supply efficiency. I would like to take a 5th card. I don't think I do either, and you don't, but it's kind of hard to make it fit in the deck with all the other stuff. Is there anything else about anti-air, or should we go to artillery?
I think we can go ahead and move on.
Alright. Okay, so let's see. No mortar.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of comments about that, but if you notice with the 17th, they get a 3-man 81 mil mortar in Phase A that costs 70 points. I just, from experience, it's really nice to have as a supporting unit, but I find it gets strafed a little bit too easy. It's just a little bit too easy to kill for my taste. So I prefer to take the off-map artillery half-track.
Whose idea was the off-map artillery half-track?
So the off-map artillery half-track's idea was actually Raven's. We played a particularly tough game against a 2nd Infantry Division player who was using the Ranger mortars a little bit too effectively. So he got the idea that you could use this off-map artillery to counter-battery them. And I was kind of skeptical at first, but after we tried it a couple times, it's actually pretty effective at killing mortars. It does way better than your own mortars at counter-battery, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a... And I think I take the mortars, but I definitely see what you're saying. Like, these mortars lose against the really any allied. The Scots and the Americans both have half-track mortars that'll definitely beat these because they're basically immune to counter battery. And the 12th just has like crazy 12-man mortar that's 80 millimeters. They have the just ridiculous 2 Veteran C Ranger mortars. So I definitely see what you're saying, that this mortar's relative to the competitors not a really good buy, and I definitely can't fault you for not taking it. Let's see, Nebel Warfare Phase B, I like it. This is pretty powerful MLRS, isn't it?
Yeah, honestly, right now it's probably too powerful. The ability to take the Nebel Warfare 41, you get a single card, you get 2 units, and they're only 60 points. They reload fast. They have vet. It's just a really great shock unit, which kind of fits the theme of this deck, I think, really well. So you really want to be able to counterattack in B and use that nice power spike and income to translate into territory taken. You can take the Nebel Warfare 42, but it's twice the cost, and you only get 1 of them. But the rockets are really nasty, so it's kind of a personal taste, I guess.
To me, the tiebreaker is how fast the Nebel Warfare 41 reloads. Plus, I mean, it is nice having 2 of them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the HE actually isn't that different, but the AoE, like, Nebel Warfare 42 has 120 AoE versus the 60. So, I mean, it's definitely a spike in power, but I think you're right. Like, this deck really shines in Phase B, and then it falls off in C, where it only gets 5 more income, whereas other decks, relative to the 17th, get a lot more income, or a lot more power spike in C, so I feel like the Nebel Warfare 41 makes the most of it. In terms of howitzers, you get the FK-18, which is just crap, you shouldn't take it. You do get the SK-18 though, which is 4,000 meter range, and we take 2 cards of them, huh?
Yeah, so the idea behind the SK-18s is that 4,000 meter range, which I'm sure is probably going to get changed a little bit in the future. Is it allows you to support your teammates, which this deck is, I kind of view it as a little bit more on the support deck kind of side. Like, if you're familiar with Wargame, I think they're kind of
like a Wargame support deck in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, so the idea is the other option that I actually kind of toyed around with in this deck is the 120 millimeter mortar for 110 points. to me, it just doesn't really fit the role of that deck. I think you should really be trying to support your teammates, and the SK-18s with the 4,000 meter range are perfect for that. You can plop them down somewhere behind your lines and shell basically whatever you want.
It's only 20 points more, actually. I mean, for 130 points, this SK-18 is, in my opinion, by far the best howitzer, just because of the range, and it's really easy to get a battery of. You take 5 and I take 5, but you could get more if you wanted to. I think up to 13 or something. You'd be a total D-bag if you did that, but I mean, it is possible and really cost-effective to do that. And like you said, the 4,000 meter range lets you reach out and touch your enemies, your allies' enemies on other parts of the map, which I think gives this deck a lot more utility than it would otherwise have.
Yeah, definitely. The other option that I kind of considered in this deck is the Bayo Schwimmwagen with the 210 millimeter off-map artillery. Again, it was kind of like a kind of a support unit. You get 2 of them, so you can use one for yourself and then send another one to like another area of the map that maybe could use a little bit of support. But I found that the SK-18s were just a little bit too good to pass up, so that's probably subject to change.
I definitely think the SK-18s will probably get nerfed in the future. I just did want to note on the Beobach half-track in Phase A, you only get 3 charges of its artillery, so it's 100 points. You really have to be good at using it. And if you find that you aren't maybe having good luck with it, I would definitely recommend taking it out of your deck, because you only get one per card, and you get it's 100 points, so it's a really hard unit to use, and it's hard to make work. But if you can make it work, it helps you get through that hard Phase A, I find. Not just for counter battery, but if you need to like even the odds in a city until you get stronger in B or whatever, it's actually a really versatile little artillery piece.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so let's see. Go to Air Tab. Alright, so let's see. We have 4 cards of airplanes and only 2 different planes in our deck. We have the Focke-Wulf A8 air superiority fighter and 2 cards of the Kanonenvogel Stuka, which is a basically tank busting plane. Why is it such a non-diverse air tab for you?
So I kind of touched on it earlier in regards to fighting the air war. So the air war basically is kind of self-explanatory, but you really want to try and fight for air superiority in this game, and you do that with fighters. Anti-air, unlike Wargame, doesn't generally shoot down planes in this game. You really have to have your own fighters to be able to chase down enemy planes. So the Focke-Wulf kind of has that nice blend of speed to intercept planes, firepower to kill them quickly, and then again speed to get away over your own anti-air so they can evac safely.
Yeah, the Focke-Wulfs, it's hard to compare them because there isn't air superiority 109 in this deck, but compared to the 109, it's a lot faster and heavily armed, but it's not as maneuverable. So the 190 is really an interceptor. You send it after the enemy plane to try and rush after the bomber and get on its tail, whereas the 109 is more of a dogfighter. You know, it's there to ensure air superiority and turn fight or whatever with the enemy planes over your AA. The Focke-Wulf's not really for that. If you try and turn with it, it's a really slow turner, and it's probably going to lose if you don't give it some backup.
Yeah.
And let's see, 2 Kanonenvogels, the Phase B 87 and the Phase C 87 for tank busting. Effective?
Very effective. Probably a little bit too effective, if I'm going to be honest. For 160 points, you get a plane that's almost guaranteed to kill a Sherman in one run. You almost get an immediate return on your investment the first time you call it out. It has veterancy. It's a little bit more accurate. It resists anti-air fire a little bit better. But if with somebody who's really on top of their game and buying anti-air and harassing you with fighters, this unit kind of falls off in effectiveness pretty quickly. But if you can get a run in against an armored column that doesn't have any anti-air and his fighters are dead or somewhere else, your enemy's gonna have a really bad time.
Yeah, like you said, this is a really effective unit. I'm not sure I'd call it overpowered, just because it's really, really slow. So the second your enemy has anti-air, like a decent amount of anti-air, or a plane, like it's really easy to push off because it evacs at only half stress level, and it's obviously really easy to kill too because it's so slow. So it's really a Punisher aircraft. Like it's not at all an I win button, I feel like, but if somebody's pushing up with their tanks and they're outrunning their hay net, or they're just being careless, it can really turn the tide if you can kind of sense that moment where it'll be able to be used.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It does get affected by anti-air quite a bit. So as long as your opponent is on top of it and making sure he has his anti-air, the Stuka is kind of not really a non-issue, but it's mitigated.
Yeah, there are some other options in this deck though. Like you could take the Rocket 109 or the Ju-88 bomber. There's actually two variants of it: the 2 big bombs or 14 smaller bombs. I actually like all three of those planes, but kind of my philosophy with this deck is you really have the artillery, that 4,000 meter range artillery howitzer, you have the Nebelwerfer, so you don't need your planes for bombing as much, but you need them to help you against tanks. I find like tanks and fighting the air war. Obviously you agree because of how your deck's structured, but you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. You have amazing artillery assets in this deck, so you really don't need that bomber to you don't need to risk points in putting a bomber in the air and killing whatever target you're trying to find. You can just use your artillery. However, one interesting thing is the Phase A Stuka bomber. I kind of experimented with this unit a little bit just to try and see if I could get some use out of it. But that was pretty much my reaction too when I tried to use it. Any anti-air at all, or even a fighter, and you've just wasted 150 points on nothing. Because by the time Phase B hits, you're never going to be able to use this unit. It's just too slow, not enough anti-air, not enough resistance to suppression from anti-air or fighters. Yeah, mediocre unit.
I'm not too pleased with it either. I mean, it's an interesting unit, but like you said, even a single anti-air piece means this thing's basically unusable because it'll be pushed off. Because with the Stuka, it's a dive bomber, so it has to literally fly directly over its target and then kind of flip around and dive straight down, which no other plane has to do. And like, it just takes too long to go through that animation, so I don't like it. But I like your air tab. It's pretty much the same as mine, and I think it's actually pretty strong. It kind of rounds out the deck. Yeah, is there anything else, or do you want to go look at my deck now?
Two quick things is that I really actually like that animation that the Stuka does. Like, it prompts the Eugen for animating it. It looks really nice.
What about the siren?
They need to add the siren, or somebody needs to mod it in, because that I would instantly download it.
Probably use the plane too, actually.
Yeah. And then the second thing I kind of wanted to touch on really quickly is the Storch Recon plane.
Oh, yeah.
Since you do have a lot of artillery in this deck, it might be interesting to take a Recon spotter plane. I don't really know if you can fit it in with only 4 air tabs currently, but maybe once like the Luftwaffe deck comes out, or not the Luftwaffe deck, the Fallschirmjäger deck. When the Fallschirmjäger deck is released, and hopefully there's another deck that can kind of provide fighters, you can have room in this deck to take it, because I think it'd be a really strong option in this deck.
Yeah. I guess that's pretty much it for air then, so let's see. Flip over to Raven's 17th Panzergrenadier and let's take a look. Alright, so this is my deck. It's pretty much the same, like our recon section is exactly the same. Our infantry, I think the only difference is I take 2 cards of Panzergrenadiers Phase B instead of 1, and 1 Pioneer in Phase B rather than 2 Pioneers and 1 Panzergrenadier. The reason I do that, and I'm going to use this segment to kind of bag on the deck a little bit. I really feel like this deck doesn't have the availability in its infantry section that it needs to compete against like the Scots or the 12th or the 2nd Infantry even. And that I understand that's not what they're going for with the design of this deck, but I'd really like it if, for example, Phase A Panzer Grenadiers got 6 per card, and maybe even Panzer Grenadiers were only 25 points per. What do you think? Am I crazy?
I personally, after playing the deck, the availability seemed okay. I would like to see maybe just a small price tweak, but I don't know. It's kind of iffy. But with the way you have your infantry set up, it definitely excels in longer range combat, kind of the more medium range hedgerow fighting from hedgerow to hedgerow,
Defensive
rather than
fighting too.
yeah, and defensive fighting. Whereas mine is more geared towards that counterattack kind of mentality in Phase B. And again, I think that's just more preference and play style. Either one works. It's just however you play.
Yeah, that's true. See, tanks, the only difference is I take both Stugs up vet and B, and that's really just it's a pretty minor difference. You get 3 per card or 2 per card. Support, this is one thing it's a little different than yours too. I take only 1 card of IG-18s because I know for you they're a god tier unit, but I like them, but I still don't. The whole toad thing and the mortars, I feel it's really hard to get the use out of them, and I could use those points elsewhere. And I do take the SPW 223 in Phase A for that wheeled machine gun in Phase A, and otherwise it's still a 2-star commander. What do you think about that?
I think it's okay. Obviously, like you said, my biggest gripe with this is you only have 1 card of IG-18, which means that being a towed unit and its weakness to artillery fire, only have 3 of them, kind of amplifies that weakness. So if you do lose one, you're losing 1/3 of your supporting firepower rather than 1/6. So I would probably try and fit in another IG-18 card somewhere. The Phase A SPW 223 is something that I was actually doing early, and it does give you that early game fire support unit, but I found that you kind of run out of commanders later, which is really important in this deck, so that's why I kind of switched over to the more late game focus for my command vehicles.
Yeah, you do have the 4 per card 232 as opposed to the I only have 1 2 per card, so I might actually switch that out rather than a 2 per card. I'll have a 4 per card later and just not have the Phase B. But anyways, in full disclosure, like this deck will literally be different tomorrow. Like I'll probably play it and run out of IG-18s, and I'll be like, oh, I need to have more of those. God dang it! And I'll put them in, and then a week from then I'll be like, oh, I really don't need them. So I mean, these decks change all the time, and that's something people should be aware. Like you're always editing and changing them. I literally just made an edit just now, so that's part of the fun of this game, really.
Yeah, definitely. Being able to kind of theory craft is a joy of mine, I guess.
Actually play more time, or spend more time in the decks than actually playing. Let's see, anti-tank, I take early Panzer Shrek, so I have a total of 8. The difference is that, yeah, I only take 2 cards of pack 43 instead of 3 cards, because I feel like you'll never need more than 3 yourself, and maybe I'm just a selfish player. I don't have those extra 2 to provide my teammates, but I mean it's kind of like just a little preference thing, I guess. The more Panzer Shreks, I like having that infantry AT and a lot of them to sprinkle around.
And I will kind of offer a counterpoint to what I was saying earlier, is that your deck kind of focuses on surviving Phase A a lot more than mine does. I would even argue mine's kind of greedy in some ways, because those units in the later game aren't really worth anything if you yourself are in a hole and need to be able to provide yourself with units. So this actually might be a little bit safer setup than what I use.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because with this deck, I don't know, I was always really frustrated with it, like, because the honestly, the Phase A is just awful. Like, you get rolled over by the Scots in the second so easily with this deck in Phase A, I find. And you just, it feels really unfair. Like, you don't have the infantry availability, you don't have the support, and it's mainly just because they don't. For example, in Recon, they could put the SPW 222 Recon in Phase A, but they have it in Phase B, so when you don't need it. And to me, I'd like the deck to be tweaked a little bit, but that's definitely true. My deck's a little more Phase A oriented, just to help me swallow the pill to get to Phase B, I guess. Let's see. Anti-air, I take 2 Flak Veerlings and 2 cards of the upvetted Flak 37s. You'll probably say that's too few Flak 37s because I only have 2 of them. But I really think this 2 veterancy is interesting, and it's kind of experimental. I just want to try them out and see how they do with those 2 upvet Flak 37s with a commander next to them.
Yeah, and like I said before, having all these really high vet supporting units allows you to take advantage of having all the extra commanders that this deck gives you. So it's definitely something interesting to try. And that's another thing too, kind of what you were touching on earlier. It's okay to try different units. Just because you watch a video and they say, oh, this unit is always better than X unit, you don't really have to take that to heart. You try different things, and you'll be surprised at what you find in this game. That's true for Wargame too.
Yeah, unless it's something I tell you, then probably take it to heart. Let's see. Artillery's pretty much the same. I take the mortar just because, like I said, it's not a great choice, but there's always a game where you're trying to advance and you need smoke or something, and you just don't have it, and you're frustrated. So I have it, and after that, that's pretty much the main difference of my deck. We have the same artillery section, the same plane section. I mean, full disclosure, you and I talk about our decks a lot. We compare our decks, we hold each other's decks, and our decks seem to look the same after a while because we talk about them so much.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of like I was saying when we were going over my deck, the mortar, there's no right or wrong answer. Playstyle, again, that kind of goes back to, I think my deck might be a little greedy, cutting the mortar, but it just isn't really a unit that feels good to me. But as Raven said, I might play a game in a week or so or whenever, and I'm like, man, I really wish I had that mortar, and it's going to be in my deck, and until I decide to take it out.
Yeah, until it's not. Things, I mean, and even then, this is the beta. So much of this is going to change. I could probably do another deck video over the 17th on launch day, and it'll look a lot different. But that's how it is. So, yeah, this is the 17th so far. And any other closing comments on my deck, your deck, or the 17th SS Division in general?
Just in general, I have to say I really enjoy how this deck plays. I know a lot of people kind of find it weird or uncomfortable to play, but I don't know, maybe it just fits my playstyle. I really like the feel of this deck, and I'm interested to kind of see how Eugen approaches balancing the units in this deck.
Yeah, I would say it's not my playstyle. It's, totally out there. But, I mean, I can appreciate it. It's definitely different, and I like that they're trying to give each of the 18 divisions kind of its own little niche or specialty or whatever, and they are, to their credit, they're building the decks very differently, and they definitely have their own playstyle. I haven't felt that anything is just like a copy of another one so far. Maybe that'll change going forward.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we're pretty much done.
Alright, so, thanks for co-casting this deck video with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, I guess this is probably where we're going to end the video. I know it's kind of gotten long, but it's a new format, so please comment or let me know what you think of it. Did you like having a guest speaker to go over his deck and mine, and kind of bounce our ideas off of each other, or do you prefer the old way where I talk into a microphone for 30 minutes until my voice is raw? So yeah, just let me know and give feedback. It's it. So I'll cut off the video now. Thanks for watching. Take care.